have a quorum.
Thank you very much. May we now have a motion to approve the minutes for the March 12th, 2025 Board of Trustee meeting?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Trustee Pacho and seconded by Trustee Sholas. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any questions, comments? Motion carries. We have now accepted the minutes from the March 12th, 2025 Board of Trustee meeting. We have 3 action items today that we need to address individually. Gray Lewis, our CFO, will present Resolution 098-2025.
Thank you. Resolution 98 is part of an investment reallocation based on our investment policy statement, with manager selections being led by our consultant, Marquette and Associates. The RFP originally went out back in 2023. We're updated more recently, and the pension committee has met on the search books that were provided and recommends via this resolution to narrow a pool of candidates for in-person interviews to 3 managers, which are the top candidates. That's Clarion, Principal, TA Core, and each of these will be interviewed for the private real estate manager. And similarly, Resolution 99 is also part of the investment reallocation of the managers from the search recommended for in-person interviews, and that would be for Brookfield, IFM Global, JP Morgan, Macquarie Global, and this is for a private infrastructure manager. So the pension committee will be interviewing them on site in the coming weeks, and we appreciate the Board of Trustees vote to move forward with these in-person interviews of the investment managers.
People we're interviewing? Can you repeat the names of the firms you're interviewing?
It's Clarion, Principal, TA Core for private real estate, and Brookfield, IFM Global, JP Morgan, and Macquarie Global.
And we'd like to note for the record that Trustee Cole is here.
Thank you.
So can we take these in global, Chair?
Let's take them individually.
Individually. Is that it? Thank you, Gray.
So I move that we approve Resolution R 098-2025.
It's been moved by Trustee Sholas, seconded by Trustee Barnes. Any discussion? Any questions? Yes,
I just have a question. Why are we interviewing class managers?
sorry.
Why are we interviewing the asset class managers as opposed to having our general manager advising us and doing those interviews and doing that?
So in the universe of asset managers, our financial advisor has brought that universe down from a few thousand providers down to a couple dozen, and then presented us with those that met a metric so that we could make the selection, because it is our responsibility to choose our asset managers. And so we narrowed it down and said in the last meeting, based on what was presented, there were 3 that were intriguing that we'd like to present before us. That's pretty much what happened in the last meeting. Yeah.
That's right.
Does that answer your question? Or, okay, great. All right, any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, next, Gray, for Resolution 99.
Yeah, a similar resolution for the other asset class, private infrastructure manager, the 3 selected again. I'm sorry, the 4 that have been narrowed down to are Brookfield, IFM Global, JP Morgan, and Macquarie Global. So we appreciate the Board of Trustees vote to also move forward with the Resolution 99.
Can we get thank you. It's been moved by Trustee Pacho, seconded by Trustee Macbull. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed, any abstentions? All right, motion carries. We will move forward with those managers. Gray Lewis, our 3rd action item.
Yep, this is our annual resolution for our contribution. We have online with us here Mitchell Bilby Rudawism is going to provide some information to explain the resolution 118. So thank you, Mitchell.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm going to try and move quickly through this to get you through it, but please ask questions as I go, or feel free to ask questions at the end. but I'm going to try and get through this in about 10 minutes, keep you all on schedule. So we're going to go over the 2025 pension plan valuation results. We'll briefly recap the effect of the changes in assumptions that are a result of the experience study that we went through with you all last year, and you adopted some new assumptions. Then we'll just take a look at the recent contribution history and what's next. So if we could look at slide 3.
Go to slide 3.
I would speak up a little bit if possible there.
If we could look at slide 3, please. Is that better? So this slide, this just shows you the present value of the plan benefits. All 3 of these columns are equal, but we're dividing them into different ways. So the present value of future benefits in the left-hand column is the present value of all expected future benefit payments from the plan to active employees, retirees, et cetera. But we have to assign a portion of that liability to past service. And that is what in the middle column is the red, the actuarially accrued liability of $368 million. That's the liability that we are funding towards. The normal cost, this little thin slice there, is the present value of the current year accruals for active employees. And then the top amount, present value of future normal costs of about $38 million. Those are the accruals expected in future years for active employees, and we'll fund those as they come due. The right-hand column splits the accrued liability between the amount that's funded by the actuarial value of assets, or $262 million of the $368 is funded, or 71% is funded. And then the unfunded accrued liability of $106 million, that's the piece that we amortize and make an annual amortization payment to fund along with the normal cost. Next slide, please. So the way we do that is there's a funding policy that the Board of Trustees adopted back in 2021. We use a smooth value of assets rather than a market value of assets that recognizes gains and losses and investment return over a period of 7 years. And what that does is it reduces volatility in the contribution rather than look at the value of assets on a single date in determining the annual contribution. We have a slide that shows you how that works. And then that $106 million of unfunded liability, that gets amortized in layers. You'll recall that when we switched to this policy, we were doing that transition amount of the unfunded at that time over a 29-year period. That was 4 years ago. Now that's down to 25 years. And then as gains and losses and assumption changes occur, we amortize those also over 25 years. And I'll get into the details of that a little bit. Next slide, please. This just shows you the membership year over year. You can see that from 24 to 25, the active employee population grew by about 3%. And the other categories of participants remained relatively constant year over year, with the number of in-pay retirees and beneficiaries only increasing by a net of 1 over the year. But there are people that entered, new retirees, and some folks that passed away. So that's why that number is relatively constant. Next slide, please. This just shows the progression of the liability over the last year. So we talked about how that red bar was $368 million, as shown in line 8. A year ago, we had $363 million in liability, and it grew over time. One, for the normal cost accrual of about $6.5 million. That's again the present value of the benefits accrued last year. Interest costs, right? As you move a year into the future, you're discounting benefit payments, but there's one less year of discount, so that's the $25 million increase. There are some gains and losses. Assumption changes reduce the liability 5.2. That's from the experience study. I'll show you the details of that. And then the liability gets reduced by the amount of benefits that are paid, a little over $26 million last year, and then a slight increase for some net transfers into the plan. But there were also some assets that came along to fund those benefits. And that's the change in liability of roughly $5 million increase over the last year. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you a breakdown of those assumption changes. You can see in line 9, there's that $5.2 million reduction in liability that we just talked about on the prior slide. I'm not going to go through each one of these assumption changes, but the largest assumption changes were folks are retiring later than we previously expected, so that they have a shorter payout period that reduced the liability as shown in line 3. And then more folks are terminating employment prior to becoming vested than we previously assumed. And so we increased the termination rate assumption that reduced liability. Also point out in the right-hand column, that's the normal cost. So as a result of these assumption changes, because more folks are terminating and not getting benefits from the plan effectively, you have to fund less. There's a lower accrual each year to fund. And so that normal cost went from what would have been 7.1 million absent the assumption changes down to 6.5. And you'll see the effect of that in your annual contribution. Next slide, please. So here is just the asset side of the equation. And this shows the last 2 years of the change in assets year over year. So from end of 22 to end of 23 in the left-hand column and end of 23 to end of 24 in the right-hand column. And you can see that in line 2, the employer contributions grew effectively with payroll over the last year. Employee contributions, which are 6% of payroll, also grew. You had 2 good years of investment return, roughly 11% in 23 and roughly 17% in 24. And in the benefit payments, they decreased a little bit year over year. You see some fluctuation in the benefit payments, mainly due to the drop recipients. That population of folks that exit the drop each year just varies year over year. And so that's what's driving that. There were more folks exiting the drop in 23 than 24. And so that's a story. But over the last year, you started at 236 million in assets and ended at 267. So a good year in 24 for investment return. Next slide, please. So this just illustrates, we show this slide every year. I'm sure it looks familiar. The red shows the market value of assets, and you can see that's volatile as the market goes up and down, particularly from 22 to 23. You can see a big drop and then a pretty good rise in the last year, reflecting that 17% investment return. But like I said, we smooth the gains and losses over the years, and that's what that light blue line is for the actuarial value of assets. And you can see that that is a smoother growth in assets over time, and that's what we use to determine the annual contribution. So rather than overreact to market volatility, we recognize those gains and losses over a 7-year period. So that's the idea of smoothing volatility. Next slide, please.
Go back to this last slide, because your previous slide doesn't match with the graphs, because you're showing in 2025 267 the S value, and here it shows like 240 something.
The right-hand side of this slide at 1/1/25, which is the end of 24, shows just north of 260 million. So I think it is consistent. It's just maybe hard to see on the screen.
Yes, sir.
Answer your question.
Okay.
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. Next slide, please. So this has a lot of detail. I don't want to get bogged down in it, but I wanted to focus on a couple things. So we each year we look at the unfunded liability. That's the amount we're going to amortize and fund. And we expect that unfunded liability to grow with normal cost and interest and be reduced by the amount that's funded during the year, line 4, the amount of employer and employee contributions. So if everything had happened investment return wise and all of our other assumptions on the liability side, if it had gone exactly according to assumptions, we would have had line 5, a current year unfunded liability of 106.7 million. But when we remeasure everything at January 1/25 with actual assets and liabilities, we got 105.9 or 106 million in unfunded. And so we had a little less unfunded liability than expected. That's a gain of 700,000. That gain can be broken down in line 8 into the various pieces. The 5.2 million reduction in the liability due to the assumption change that we talked about earlier. And these other two items are experience gains and losses for assets and liabilities. that add up to about 4.4 million. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see those numbers surface again. So these are the amortization layers, a lot of detail on this slide, but you can see a couple items I want to point out. So in the very first row, remember there was that unfunded at transition of $99 million that's getting amortized as the initial unfunded liability under this funding policy. And that annual amortization in the far right column is $7.5 million. And you can see the outstanding balance of that just to the left of it. After 5 years, it's dropped from 99 to 93 million, reflecting the payment of both interest and principal over the last 5 years. And every year we add some new layers. And so let's look at the layers in the bottom two rows that we added this year. As I pointed out on the last slide, the sum of those two loss pieces was 4.5 million. So there's a new loss base saying, okay, we had some losses we didn't expect. We're going to amortize those over 25 years, and we'll increase your amortization payment by $360,000 in the far right column of the second to last row. Likewise, the assumption changes from the experience study, the very last row, the 5.2 million reduction, those get amortized over 25 years, and they reduce your amortization payment by $400,000 a year. So you add all those amortization payments up, that's 8.5 million. That's at the beginning of the year. As the footnote shows, because you make contributions throughout the year, we'll give that interest to the middle of the year. So your amortization payment with interest is 8.8 million. If we go to the next row slide, where we look at the contribution, you'll see here we've broken it into the normal cost and the unfunded liability amortization in lines 1A and B. If you look in the 2025 column, that 8.827 million is that amount in bold in the footnote on the prior slide. That's this year's amortization payment. You can see it's a little less than last year's because those two amortization payments that are new actually on balance reduce the amortization payment. The normal cost is 6.7 or close to 6.8 million. You'll note that earlier I said it was 6.5 million. Well, that was at the beginning of the year. This is giving interest to the middle of the year. And so year over year, the sum of those two pieces is about the same as it was last year, 15.6 million versus 15.575. But that's the total contribution that's needed to fund the plan. Of course, the employees contribute 6% of pay. That payroll grew some year over year. And so this year, the employee contribution is expected to be 3.8 million, resulting in a net employer contribution of 11,750,000, shown in line 3 in the middle column. And that's a little bit less than last year as a dollar amount. And again, that's because of some of those assumption changes and the reduction in the normal cost that was otherwise expected. But total payroll has grown year over year. Part of that has to do with new entrants. Remember, there were 3% increase in employee population. Part of that just has to do with the natural growth of pay of the population. So when we take that line 3 as a percent of line 4, there's a pretty big reduction year over year. And just going back to the experience study, I don't have this information in these slides, but when we did the experience study, we had estimated the reduction in liability would be 4.9 million. It ended up being 5.2. We estimated the reduction in the employer contribution would be 1.5% of payroll. You can see it's closer to 2.5, and that extra percent is really due to the payroll growing more than expected year over year. So while the dollar amount of the contribution is only going down 343,000 year over year, as a percent of pay, it's gone down 2.5%. But again, you're going to end up funding that amount, and it's just a smaller percent of payroll. Any questions on that? All right. Next slide, please. So this is just an illustration of how that unfunded liability of $106 million, which is really the red line on the left side of the graph, is 106 million. Each of these bars represents one of those amortization pieces. We showed you there were several layers. The big gray bar, the tallest bar in there, is that transition liability, which is now $93 million. And you'll see over the next 25 years, we'll amortize all these, and we expect the balance to go to zero of these as long as that employer contribution is funded. So this just shows you how the unfunded should progress over time. And of course, it will, in the early years, you're paying more interest than principal on these amortization payments. So the reduction is slower initially, but it accelerates over time as you pay more principal than interest in those later years. But that's all this illustrates, is paying that $106 million off.
And Mitch, again, that's just like a home mortgage. In the beginning, you pay more interest than principal, and as it progresses, it reverses, and you're paying more principal than interest, right? It's the same
That's right.
principle.
Yeah, same principle as a fixed interest mortgage. That's right. Next slide, please. This just shows a history of over the last 7 or 8 years of the employer contributions, employee contributions, benefit payments, and investment return. You'll note the first 2 columns, we have the employer contribution that is expected based on our actual valuation. But again, we say contribute, in this case, 18% of payroll. And if payroll is bigger than what we estimated, then the contribution in the right-hand column, the actual employer contribution, would be bigger than what we expected. And so the actual contribution in many of these years was bigger than we expected just because payroll grew faster than expected. In a couple of years, it's a little bit less when payroll was lower than expected, like in 2021 during COVID. That's just showing those a relatively steady increase in the employer contribution, but it's gone down this year from 24 to 25. Employee contributions similarly follow the same pattern with the growth in payroll, going from 2.5 million back in 2018 to expected at 3.9 million this year. Benefit payments, again, this just shows you a history of what's coming out of the plan to pay these benefits. Those have grown over time as far as annuity payments go. But again, that fluctuation, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot to do with drop payments. And so you have a couple million in drop payments each year, roughly. Some years more than that, some years less, but that's what's causing that variance year over year. And then just a history of the investment return, right? You got the cash flows coming in of the employer contribution, employee contributions, cash flows going out with the benefit payments, and then increase in the value of assets in most years, as shown in this right-hand column. So it's just a history of cash flows here. Next slide, please. So the action item, which I'm not sure you're taking up today or at the next meeting, will be the Board of Trustees would there's a resolution to accept the results of the evaluation and to fund this new percentage for the rest of the year, 18.288% of payroll. So that would be, I'm not sure if that's today or your next meeting.
It's today.
That'll be what you'll propose. All right. And then lastly, just real quick, we've recently, on the last slide, issued employee benefit statements for the year. We have recently provided the COLA calculations, and our next meeting in September will be presenting the results of that COLA. And again, there'll be an item to a resolution to increase the payments of retirees over 65 by the amount of the COLA. And we are also tasked with examining how the COLA is implemented and whether there should be any changes made to it in a COLA study, which we'll present at that time. And then again, the pension portal went live at the beginning of the year, and employees have access to that, and they can get their most recent benefit statement off the portal. And just lastly, the experience study, we do that every 5 years, at a minimum every 5 years. So we're scheduled to do it in fall of 29 since we just did it in fall of 24. But if anything arises in the meantime that warrants reexamination, we'll bring it to your attention. And that concludes the slides.
Mitch, Dexter, look, I still see in the COLA study, you don't talk about the micro consideration. So are we just, you're not going to do that? Because I see you mentioned the disabled, the entire benefit, on the full entire benefit. but we discussed twice about looking at a more localized, COLA
Yes,
indice.
sorry. It's
And
just,
you don't have it
yes,
on here, though. That's what I'm saying.
Dexter, yeah, that's just an oversight. We do plan to look at a more local measure of inflation to the extent, we can find something and or just a multiplier as we discussed at the last meeting. So that is on our list. It's just not on this bullet.
Thank you.
Apologize for that oversight.
That's the et cetera on that bullet.
That's the et cetera? Okay.
Yeah.
Miscellaneous, et cetera.
This is Moby. I want to ask you, what is the total number of employees and what's the number of people on drop?
Presently, there are, I believe, 61 people in the drop. So those folks are still working, but in the drop participation period. The total number of employees is about 1,200, just over 1,200
Thank you.
at present.
So it's less than 2%.
It's small.
Good. All right. May we have a motion to approve Resolution R-118, 2025?
Aye.
Got it. Been moved by Trustee McBool, seconded by Trustee Joseph. Any questions? None? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. There are a number of information items for your review. Are there any other questions, comments?
Comment.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Second.
Motion by Trustee McBool, seconded by Trustee Sholas. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Directors, thank you. Thank you, trustees. Criteria and, the goals. What are we doing? In a couple weeks. That's-
Oh, in a couple.
It's not-